Here we are back in the Spodcast coffee bar, in the lovely, nice new, very comfortably outfitted book corner. It feels that time flies. It doesn't feel like any time at all since we were last sitting here.
It's almost like we're recording this episode immediately after the last one.
We would never be so organised.
No, that's a level of organisation that has eluded us from the very start. There has been some change though. Like we've got cushions on the armchairs.
Yes, this is an Arabella Weir cushion sitting in the David Warner armchair.
And I think this one's made out of Paul McGann's jacket.
Oh, that's why there's all those leather sound effects.
Oh, I was going for the velvety one, but yeah, sure.
Oh, that's
Well-
why there's all those velvety sound effects.
Yes. And I'm sure they're very different, those sound effects, that I probably won't edit in, if I'm honest.
Well, you wouldn't be the first.
Indeed. Maybe this will win awards like Dark Eyes. It should. It absolutely should.
See, the thing is, we know people from Big Finish listen to these podcasts, and this is why we don't get anyone come on for interviews anymore.
Yes, they've heard the coffee bar episodes and they've gone, hell no.
However, just like the good people at Big Finish, you're listening to a podcast of spurious morality.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast of Spurious Morality, Coffee Bar's Book Corner, where Connor and I, hello Connor.
Hello.
Where Connor and I are discussing, among many other things, books we've been reading or listening to, and we are going to talk about Doctor Who a little bit more as well, because there's a few Big Finish releases we want to give shout outs to.
Doctor Who's so...
I know. We've kind of done it to death on this podcast, like 4 series. Come on. Surely there's something else.
Most Doctor
I'm well
Who
aware.
Series now.
Well, I'm well aware that this is going out probably the week after a Blake 7 episode of Spodcast, so maybe actually our listeners do want some Doctor Who. Maybe it's been a while. Who knows? So yes, previously in the very, very comfortable coffee bar book corner, we discussed a few things that we've been reading, listening to, etc. We talked about Brandon Sanderson and the Cosmere, and we talked about a bit of Agatha Christie. You're doing some Poirot, aren't you?
Yes, or should I say, oui, monsieur.
Very, very good. Very convincingly Belgian.
I'm not going down that road. Down that road lies cancellation.
Yes. And Belgium have already had a red card unfairly rescinded against them recently, so let's leave it there. There we go. That was our World Cup coverage.
Yes, commiserations to you. I can't quite have it in me to gloat. Not in front of you anyway.
In all fairness, England did lose more games than Northern Ireland at the 2026
yes, that's true.
World Cup.
That's true. That's extremely true.
That's a statistic. Anyway, we've lost 3/4 of our listeners in that 30-second segment there, so let's try something else.
There's no surefire way to lose Doctor Who listeners than to talk about football.
The good news is there is some Doctor Who I can talk about at this stage. We're going to go into Big Finish later, but I have been continuing my sort of occasional journey through the Target novelizations. So I'm listening to the audiobooks of the Target novelizations in classic Doctor Who order. So I've had a bit of a gap. Like, I think I got to the end of the Space Museum and kind of went, I need space now, and took it and listened to a lot of other things. But sort of finding myself at a little bit of a sort of pause in listening to other things, I decided, oh, let's pick these up again. And I've recently done The Chase and The Time Meddler. And you know what? I've really bloody enjoyed them. The Chase is great. Like, it's John Peel. I know people have opinions about John Peel, but I thought this was an awful lot of fun. He kind of managed to balance the sort of weird tone that The Chase has, where it's all a bit comedy and silly in places, but at the same time, the TARDIS crew has a bunch of very, very murderous Dalek assassins after them that can pursue them anywhere through time and space. But yeah, it had so many great moments. It did what a good target does. It builds on the bits that you want to be built on, and it kind of hurries by the bits that maybe drag out a little bit in the TV serial. Um, it did a very good job with the duplicate Doctor. That obviously comes across better on page than it did on screen because, let's face it, he looked like nothing like William Hartnell on screen. But my favourite part was actually the encounter with Morton Dill, which is a sort of silly 5-minute sequence in the original serial. It doesn't get much more time here, but there's just a wonderful part where the Dalek sort of justifies not exterminating him because it concludes that actually the human race is worse off with him as part of it, with him alive.
You mentioned
I
that
just,
the other day, and I think that is the funniest thing that
it's
has ever been
amazing.
used to explain something in a Target book.
Yeah, it's just that it didn't need to explain why the Daleks left him alive. It just, it happens in the serial. They just kind of go, yeah, we're wasting our time with you, off we pop. But it's just this wonderful little bit of reasoning where the Dalek goes, yeah, the human race is worse off with this guy. We're going to let him live. So that was a lot of fun. I have to admit, it did kind of, once we got to Mechanus, what is the last 2 episodes of the TV serial, it did kind of slow down a little bit, as it does in the TV serial. It kind of does a fairly good job of the battle between the Daleks and the Mechanoids, although it has the Mechanoids come off quite a bit worse than they do. Like, I guess it's implied in the serial, but due to budgeting reasons, you only ever really see 3 Mechanoids and 3 Daleks, and there's a couple of models there as well. But it sort of makes a point that the Daleks do have the upper hand, but they're just overwhelmed by sheer number of Mechanoids in the Mechanoid City. It makes sense, but that's not quite how we saw it on screen. The end result's the same. They both wipe each other out and our heroes escape, and we think Stephen's been killed, but he's not. And there's a nice little sort of epilogue where you get Stephen wandering into the TARDIS, and then at the start of the Time Meddler, there's a prologue that pretty much covers the same thing, but from the perspective of a different writer, obviously. Time Meddler was really, really good. It was Nigel Robinson who wrote that one, and it's a pretty straight retelling of the story itself. There's, a few things. I think what happens to Edith when the Vikings attack is kind of a little more heavily implied in the novel than it is in the serial. But it's overall a very, very, very good and enjoyable piece of writing. And Peter Purvis reads The Time Meddler, and he's in full, like, First Doctor mode, as you would get him in Big Finish as well. So it's kind of wonderful to just have an extra adventure with Peter Purvis's interpretation of the First Doctor, which I do really, really enjoy and actually miss since we've moved to full cast.
I was about to say the same thing. I really missed the Peter Purvis version of the First Doctor.
I thought it was excellent in the early adventures. I absolutely love those Stephen narrated early adventures.
There's a warmth and a charm to that I think is much missed from my point of view.
And I think that, like, Peter Purvis is taking it incredibly seriously. Like, this is his tribute to his very good friend William Hartnell, who he absolutely loved working with and idolised. And I think it's very, very clear that that's the case from like the performance. So yeah, they were good. I mean, I'm really enjoying the targets. I'm never going to be able to binge the living daylights out of them, but there's just an occasional 4, 5, 6 hour listen that just slots into any gap I may have in listening to bigger projects. I think they're really enjoyable, and I think it's a really good way to re-enjoy a lot of Doctor Who stories that at this point I'm probably too familiar with to fully enjoy on screen anymore.
Yes, I can. I like an occasional target book. Just as a nice, it's a nice wee palate cleanser, or if you need a quick read, um, they're always nice to drop in on. And I try and hop around. I don't ever like read, you know, all the same doctors, but I like hopping into, oh, which doctor do I feel like spending time with this week? Oh, some Tom Baker, yes, please.
Yes. And I'm enjoying doing it as a marathon. I'm enjoying sort of following it through the story order as according to television, because obviously that's not how they were released as books, and it's certainly not how they've been released as audio books. But it's just another way to enjoy it, and it's great that after being a Doctor Who fan for the best part of 30 years, I can still find another way to just enjoy it all. And I enjoy the new series ones just as much as well. We've listened to a fair few of them for this podcast now, and they've always been sort of really good, really fun interpretations of what happened on screen. Any other books you'd like to discuss?
Yes, something I mentioned in the last episode was I'm trying to read my way through more series of books and spend a bit more time in the same worlds. I have actually been rereading the Hunger Games books, because I hadn't read any of them for at least 10 years, and I had only ever read the original trilogy. I've never read either of the prequels before. So the two prequels is A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and Sunrise and the Reaping. So Sunrise and the Reaping is due out later this year as a film. I would quite like to have read it before I see it. So I'm rereading them all. I've done most of the first trilogy so far. I've just started into Mockingjay, and then so that's the first three is the ones I've read before. This is revisiting for me, and then I'm going to read the two prequels for the first time. So again, that's a once a month thing that I'm just a nice little reading project to chip away at over the summer here. And it's really nice. They're much leaner than I remember. They're much shorter books than I remember actually. But it's very efficient prose, and a lot of picture is painted with very few words, and that's a real credit to Suzanne Collins as an author. Um, I think particularly the first one reminded me a lot of it reminded me a lot more of Stephen King, um, than I expected it to. Actually, I think there's a lot of DNA of I think there's a lot of the Long Walks DNA in it, actually. Um, but they are truly superb, and I'm having a really good time with them. They are, I think they're probably going to be timeless books. They've had a long period of being on top of the YA world, and I can't quite ever see that going away. I think they are becoming true classics, and will be known as true classics for a long time. I'm having a really good time reading them. I'm looking forward more so to Sunrise on the Reaping. I think it's the prequel I would like to read more, um, because it's the one that's based on Haymitch's game, um, versus Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is about President Snow as a young man, and I think I'm more naturally excited for the Haymitch one, but I'm excited for both. Definitely, it's one of those things that I'm sad I let pass me by. Um, Both last year when Sunrise and the Reaping came out, and a couple of years ago when Songbirds and Snakes was released. Because I didn't read it and I didn't see the film actually either. But I'm really enjoying getting back into them, and I'm very excited to see the film version again. I think I'll probably do once I've finished this marathon of the books. I'll watch all the films and then go and see Sunrise and the Reaping.
So I've never done the books. I watched all of the films sort of together. It must have been when the fourth one came out. So I've not seen the more recent film, the prequel, but I've seen like the 4 films from the 3 main books. And ever since I've gone, yeah, I need to read these, and I've never got round to it. And actually, that I think they've just probably been bumped up the to-do list a little bit. Because you're right, it's they're a bit of a phenomenon that has passed me by. Like I say, I watched the films very, very casually. I didn't go to see them at the cinema. I watched them when all 4 were out on Blu-ray or whatever. So yeah, I need to make an effort with that. But it seemed like perfectly good stuff, and it's probably a frame of reference that I should have a little bit more in my arsenal, I think. So yes, we'll do that. And I am interested in the prequels as well.
This sort of kick-started the whole YA dystopias trend, which went on for a very long time. It's not just as big as it used to be, but it still has never fully gone away. It still puts in an appearance from time to time. And the Hunger Games was sort of the flag. It was and is the flagship of that trend of books, I think. They are genuinely very good. I can see there's a lot of appeal to adults as well. They're definitely aimed at teenage audiences, but I think there's a lot in them for adults as well. And they do deal with surprisingly complex themes at times. There's an awful lot, unsurprisingly, for a dystopian novel, and that's obviously what the books are most well known for, on how the government controls a population, or how a dystopian government can control a population, and sort of the propaganda and the means of keeping a population docile. That all is done very, very well, and I I would even go as far as to say I think they should be required reading in schools. Truthfully, I think there's a lot in there that can prepare young people for what they might experience in the political world of the future, and yeah, they're very worth reading. They're very worth doing, and I'm having a really good time with them at the moment.
Well, I will save my traditional, less Shakespeare, more relevant reading arguments that I've been making forever and ever and ever about reading in schools for another time. But yes, assume that I agree with you, and let's leave it there. And I have to admit, I've been very tempted to revisit books that I read when I was younger, when I was sort of in my teens. And it's kind of come about partly after Big Finish announced they were doing Young James Bond. Never really read those, I had to admit. I was more into the sort of rival at the time, which was the Alex Rider books, which they've had a couple of adaptations, and I've just never quite got into them in the way that I did with the books at the time. Now, one reason I want to revisit these actually is I never finished the series. I kind of grew out of them before the series had concluded. I think I probably read 6 of them, I guess, as a
I
teenager.
I think so. I definitely read all the ones that Charlie Higson did. But I
Oh, the
didn't
young Bonds.
recently that Steve Cole actually took the series over and did a second run. So I think there's 5 Charlie Higson ones, and then the same again written by Steve Cole, which I didn't know existed at all until last year.
I've decided I'm definitely going to go for the Big Finish series, even though I'm not particularly familiar with the source material. But that
It
should be
might
good.
it might be cool to follow those along as well on Spodcast with and discuss both, read the book and then discuss the Big Finish version.
I'd be up for that. I could do that. I've also been very, very tempted. And again, it's another series that I grew out of reading that kind of thing before the series had concluded, and it's been a big regret for 20 odd years now. Artemis Fowl, those books were brilliant. I absolutely loved those. And again, they created a very good world, and they didn't really talk down to you as a young reader. So I do want to revisit those. And again, I probably read 5, and I think there's 8, 9 of them in total. So there's definitely some stuff that will be new to me there as well. Again, adaptation was attempted and didn't go down particularly well. So hopefully there's more for me to enjoy there. So that's just nice little sidestep there is something that I'll probably do at some point. Another recent read of mine has been one that I actually had ordered to listen to on Audible on day one and didn't get around to it when it was first released. But it's The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. Interesting one, slightly difficult to describe. I'd kind of go like alternate universe Pope Suicide Squad is probably the best way to describe it. So it's set in our world, but in an alternate history. There were a couple of major historical events that have affected our civilization that didn't happen there. The main one being that Troy never fell in the world that The Devils is set in. But it's just very sort of interesting to explore the idea of a slightly more militarized church and that kind of thing. It's sort of similar time, not the same at all, but similar territory to sort of what Moffat did with the church in the 11th Doctor era, just like that kind of how would the church evolve if it was a slightly different thing. It's a jolly good adventure book, though. It sort of reminded me of quite a few things while going through it. It's fairly serialized in terms of a lot of what happens. It kind of reminded me of The Hobbit from that sense. Like every 4 or 5 chapters seems to take you into a different story, and you just get to know the characters a little bit better as it goes along. And then there's sort of the big battle at the end. Again, similar format to The Hobbit. Abercrombie's writing. Now, I've never actually read an Abercrombie before. I've had it recommended to me an awful lot, but I've never actually read one. But there was a definite whiff of Douglas Adams in there in terms of the humour. Perhaps a little darker, a bit more sardonic, but just sort of the way it's written, the way things are described. There's definitely an influence there. Now, I actually kind of hybrided this one, which is something we were talking about before we started recording, Connor, in terms of I listened to some of it and I read some of it. So I had the paperback, read a few chapters, and then when listening became more convenient, I switched up to the audiobook instead. The audiobook's read by Stephen Pacey. Big Finish Blake Seven fans will know as Tarrant from Blake Seven. He's done a fair bit of other stuff as well. He's one of those actors that's sort of consistently been there on British television for a good 40 years. 45 years, 50 years. And he's great. He's a fantastic narrator. I'm on quite a few sort of audiobook discussion channels. Who knew, I do an audiobook podcast. And he is generally considered to be one of the best narrators in the business. I'm going to make the what's Abercrombie's big fantasy one? Is it the First Law? Is it? Have I got that right?
Yes, I think so.
Yes. So that's made up of a couple of trilogies and standalones. I've actually bought myself the paperbacks of the first trilogy and got hold of the audiobooks, and it's my intention to kind of do them while I'm on holiday. I'd certainly like to get through Blade itself, which is the first one. Yeah, it was a really, really good read. It's quite a long read. It's a fairly chunky book, but it's because what's going on constantly changes, because there's all of these sort of serialized events while these characters are on the journey. It doesn't get dull. I found it quite easy to get through. So that's definitely one for the recommended list. And I believe they've more or less just announced the sequel that'll be out next year. So, which is good because it ended in a way where I definitely wanted to A, spend more time with these characters, and B, find out what happens to them next, because some of them didn't have the nicest ending in The Devils. It'd be good to see what happens moving forward. So yeah, roll on the sequel and roll on just more Abercrombie, which is my plan for the summer.
Yes, he's one that a lot of people have started recommending to me as well recently. A few people have independently sort of said, "Oh, you should read some Joe Abercrombie" over the last few weeks and months. So I will have to give him a go at some point. But the problem is, as ever, there are just too many books and not enough time. I know the
And,
Devils
you
has
know,
been a real hit though.
you do generally sort of hang around in an environment where there are literally too many books surrounding you as well. So,
Honestly, it's constant temptation all day, every day.
but yes, I'm definitely on board with Abercrombie, and I'm very, very keen to get on to The Blade itself next, which I'm told the general consensus is actually the first law stuff is better than the Devils, but if the Devils is kind of a weaker starting point, I'm looking forward to what I've got lined up.
Yeah, I think that's the consensus I've heard as well. So if you've started with the Devils and you've enjoyed it, you're in for a really good time with the other ones.
Roll it on. Um, Go ahead, you do one.
I've been doing something a little bit different, and this has been a longer term thing over the last year or so, and it's mainly based around sort of one range of books. But I've been reading a bit more in terms of comic books recently, mainly DC. I've always been more predisposed to like DC. I think their superheroes appeal to me more. I'm a bigger fan of Batman and Superman than I am of quite a lot of Marvel's heroes. Um, but I've been reading a few comic books recently. The most recent one I did was Superman Red Sun, which is an alternative history take on Superman, where his pod crash lands in Soviet Ukraine, and he's raised as a member of the Soviet Union and becomes sort of the poster boy for communism, rather than truth, justice, and the American way. And it's really well thought out. It's really well done. There's so many tent poles of the Superman story turn up in it. You know, Lex Luthor's a huge part of it. Lois Lane's a huge part of it. Um, but Superman himself, I was actually surprised at how close Superman is to his regular counterpart. Like he still has the idealistic nature that he has in the regular books, and that translates. It's the story is about how that idealism translates into Superman being raised as a member of the Soviet Union, and it goes on that he sort of becomes the poster boy for the Communist Party, and eventually, reluctantly at first, takes over as the leader of the Communist Party after Stalin's death. And it goes through that. It's a really neat alternative history, and I love alternative history stories as a general rule. But it was really cool to get this one sort of based around Superman and the Cold War. Um, it's only 3 issues long, but they're more substantial issues, and it feels like quite a substantial book as you're reading it. I had a really good time reading it. Um, Other one I've done recently was a Supergirl one, which it's Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, which is what the recent Supergirl film was based on. Now, film's good. Really like the film. Had a good time watching it. The comic book is leaps and bounds ahead of it, and I would highly encourage anybody to go and read the comic book. It is genuinely one of the best I've read. But it sort of takes Supergirl out of Superman's shadow. He's not an element in it at all. And tells a story that's fully unique to her, because if you compare Superman and Supergirl, both had very different upbringings, in that Superman crash lands on Earth as a baby, and is raised by the Kent family. Whereas Supergirl was older when she left Krypton, and was around to witness its destruction and its sort of descent into destruction. So it explores her trauma from seeing the destruction of her home world, and being aware that there's only 2 Kryptonians left. 3 if you're counting Crypto. Crypto's a part of it as well. But it pairs her up with Ruthie, someone else whose whole family has been killed, and Supergirl can see her starting along a dark path that she wouldn't have had to go down, other than this tragedy of her family being murdered. Um, and it's about Supergirl going and trying to save Ruthie from her own need for revenge. It's a fantastic story. It's told very stylishly. The art is gorgeous, and I had such a good time with it. It's totally standalone. You don't need to know anything about DC Comics to read it. It's a fully standalone book. Really highly recommend folks get it. It's everywhere at the moment because the film's out and the film's so closely based on it. So you would not have trouble tracking a copy down at all. What these have in common, and this is what I mean about the one series of books, is they're part of a range of books called DC Compacts. And DC Compacts are basically little smaller format versions of comic books. They're just slightly larger than a normal paperback book. And they're $8.99 a piece. And DC have been releasing some of their best storylines in this format. And I'm gonna sound like a salesman here for them because I think they're the best thing to happen to comics in years. And I've had such a good time with the ones that I've picked up, and there's some really good stories on the way from them. So there's well over, I think there's 20 or 30, maybe even closer to 40 have been released now over the last couple of years. And they are, for me, the very best way to get into comics. They are, as I say, some of the best, most famous storylines. Like they've done Batman Under the Red Hood, All-Star Superman. There's one, I haven't read it yet, but it's the next one I'm going to read. It's a Green Lantern story called Far Sector. And it's not one of the main Green Lanterns. I think she might be new and original to this story. I'm truthfully not sure. But it's a murder mystery on a planet where there has been no murder for centuries. And I'm really, really excited to read that. I'm going to read that in the next few weeks. But yeah, they're just class. I think they're $8.99 a pop. They're just slightly larger than a normal paperback book, and I love them. I think they're brilliant, and I'm having a really good time with the ones I've read to date, and would recommend them to anybody.
I think I've never really managed to get into comic books, to be perfectly honest. And I think part of it, I just don't get on particularly well with the format. That's fine. That's me. But then when I do get past that, and I am completely capable of getting past it, but it's that whole, okay, well, to understand this run of comics, you need to understand the run that came before it. And to understand that, you need to understand the 5 years worth of comics that came before that. And to fully appreciate that one, you've got to read this one from the 70s. It just feels like it snowballs and snowballs. So actually, to have a more accessible, here it is, read it like a book, there you go, sounds like a really, really good idea. Because the comics themselves just end up being so interconnected that it's kind of impossible to just walk in at any point, I guess.
I don't think they've said this specifically, but I think they are an attempt to take on, because something that has really been popular in books over the last few years and in book selling over the last few years is manga is really on the ascendant right now. We sell so much of it. It is selling hand over fist. It's really popular among younger demographics now. And they're all, again, the vast majority of manga volumes are $8.99 a go. So I think this is DC trying to compete with that. And the vast majority of the books they've released are starting points. They are jumping on points, and they're accessible both in terms of price and format, and in the stories being told that you don't need to do your homework for them. You can just pick up any of them, read it, and it's a standalone story, and you don't need to know, as you say, the total history of Batman going back to the 1970s. So they're the best thing ever as far as comic books go for me. I really love them.
It sounds like the best possible way for them to kind of capture the market as it is at the moment. So fair play to them. I mentioned when we were talking about the Brandon Sanderson stuff, I was listening to the graphic audio versions. Graphic audio have done a fair few adaptations of Marvel and DC storylines. So there is Batman stuff, the Spider-Man stuff. I've not listened to a lot, but what I have listened to, I've really enjoyed. I think the two that have sort of stood out to me, I've listened to. were Avengers versus X-Men. Now, I did actually read that comic series when it was originally out, and was around the time of the first Avengers film, I think. Sort of got caught up in all of that while I was at uni. But secondly, I listened to a Daredevil one that's basically Daredevil's origin story and his ongoing battles with Fisk that have been obviously adapted quite a bit by Netflix and Disney, and it's familiar territory, but it's interesting to hear an adaptation of the comic book version that's fairly closer to the original than the TV stuff's been. So yeah, I've enjoyed those, and it's a way that just makes it a little more accessible for me, certainly. Last non-Doctor Who thing we're going to talk about there, I think, is just I've been talking about this on Coffee Bar episodes since I started it over a year ago now, but another series that I'm sort of throwing myself into and I'm mainly listening to. I've read a few as well and jumped between audio and book. But Ian Rankin's Rebus series just continues to be an amazing character. I finished fairly recently Exit Music, which was meant to be the last one. He sort of said, I've had enough of writing Rebus now, and I've been writing Rebus for 30 years, therefore Rebus must surely be retired at this point. So in Exit Music, Rebus retires. There's been a whole sort of continuation since where Rebus is kind of dragged out of retirement and back into the world of Edinburgh as it's presented in the books. And I will pick those up at some point, but I'm using this as a point to very deliberately have a break, because I think there was 5 or 6 years between Exit Music and whatever it is comes next. So I'm not going to wait that long, but I'll happily have 6 months off before revisiting. But yeah, really, really good series of books. And as I've said before, it just deserves the reputation that it has as some of the best British fiction has ever been. And it's slightly different to anything else I seem to be reading or listening to at the moment. And it's nice to sort of step into that.
There's a series you might like. I haven't started them yet, but I am going to start them, by Kate Atkinson. I can't remember the life of me what the detective's called in them, but the first book is Case Histories, and I think they're like, maybe they're not all like this, but at least some of them are like cold cases that have been reopened up again, as new evidence comes to light. But they're meant to be fantastic. Sort of quite a substantial crime series. I think they've maybe always, they're maybe not as well known as they deserve to be. Now, I could be talking total rot, and I'm sure they are. The people I know who have read them love them, and I think I'll let you know how I get on with it, because as I say, I'm going to do the first one soon. The first one's called Case Histories. But that might be one for you as well once you're finished with the Rebus series.
I like a good bit of crime fiction. It sounds like that could be up my street. Go on then. Let's talk about some big finishes. Let's talk about some recent big finishes we've enjoyed, because we do always come back round to big finish in Doctor Who.
We do, absolutely.
We do, and so we should. So we've just listed off a few from the last couple of months that we've enjoyed. We're not going to go into immense detail about any of these, but it's just they're worth a mention. Now, at the time of recording, we have had one 12th Doctor adventure with John Culshaw in the role of the 12th Doctor, and that was The Second Death. By the time this goes online, I suspect we'll be at least halfway into the series, if not a little bit further. They're being released one a week. But just to summarise, Second Death, I thought it was a pretty damn strong opening. It wasn't anything revolutionary or wild, but it kind of kept that Russell T Davies format of reliable opening episode, but we're saving the best till later, and I feel as though that was kind of what we got here. We get to see kind of a range of this 12th Doctor as portrayed by John Culshaw. I like it. I think it's a decent enough impression. I don't think anyone's going to be able to do Capaldi in the same way that they've been able to do Matt Smith or other Doctors, because I think Capaldi's just so wonderfully unique. I think his voice is so wonderfully unique, his mannerisms, his vocal performance, all of it. But I think Culshaw's doing a damn good job, and I'm just glad that I can enjoy adventures with this Doctor again on audio.
Yeah, I liked it. I would agree. I think it's, in terms of the script and the story, good. But I think the best is probably still to come from this series. I think Culshaw's pretty good, and I know it's his. We've only heard him. It's not his first story playing this version of the Doctor. He has previously done one of the Halloween box set stories, but he wasn't in it very much. He wasn't in it very much at all, actually. And this is the first time we've heard his 12th Doctor over a sustained period of time. And I actually got on with it. So I did. I think he's pretty good. Um, there was a wee moment, sort of maybe about a third of the way through, that really sold me on it, which was, it's just a wee throwaway line in the scene where it's just after, the bit where Ash goes and meets the future version of the Doctor, and he tells him about. He basically puts in, he lets Ash know that he's a time traveler. He proves to Ash that he's a time traveler, and Ash goes back and then to break the earlier version of the Doctor out of jail. It's the bit where Ash goes in to rescue the Doctor out of the jail, where um the Doctor is as confused by this as the jailer is. And he says, the guard says, "Oh, I bet you've arranged this with him." And the Doctor goes, "Oh no, Craig, I'm as clueless as you are." And it's the wee bit about him. Just he's been in jail and he's on first name terms with the guard. That just struck me as the most 12th Doctor thing. Like that's a moment I can actually see happening on TV. So it was the fact that the Doctor's got himself on first name terms with the guard, and he's like, "Oh, I'm no, I have nothing to do with me. I'm with you on this. I'm confused. I don't know." It was just that wee moment. I thought, okay, they've actually nailed that. So I'm looking forward to the rest. But I'm right in saying this is a weekly series.
Yes. So it's 6 episodes across 6 weeks, I think.
Perfect, as Doctor Who should be.
Yes. We're actually getting weekly Doctor Who in 2026. Who knew?
Oh, see how often that happens in a few years.
Crap. Um, okay.
So I've been asking for this for years, and I'm really excited it's finally happening. Like the Big Finish are doing a weekly release Doctor Who series, and it's, again, it feels like one of those proper little event listen things. Like, oh yes, we're going to tune in as a community to Doctor Who every week. That's what happens on TV. That's how Doctor Who
Yeah,
should be.
it is. And I wonder if moving forward, Big Finish will do a little bit more of it. Now, I know we've had a few series that have released monthly. We seem to have reverted back to what we were doing originally with the Eighth Doctor and Fourth Doctor Adventures, which was an ongoing series with one release a month. And we're getting this with Dark Gallifrey. We're getting it with Sontarans versus Rutans versus Sontarans, or whatever it is. I'm liking it, but I am finding that I'm still appreciating these more when I listen to them bunched together. And I think it's because a month is too much of a gap for something that's serialized. It wasn't so much with the Eighth Doctor Adventures, but certainly in the way that Dark Gallifrey is working, or the timey-wiminess of Rutans versus Sontarans. I've already decided I'm going back and listening to Rutans versus Sontarans as a whole. Probably give it a year or so before I do that, but I think I'm going to get so much more out of it doing it that way than I have done just doing one a month. That being said, I did enjoy the series, so I'm hoping I can just enjoy it more.
In terms of the weekly release thing, I think this is a format particularly that would suit the Eighth Doctor, because the last few years of Eighth Doctor has been 6 episode arcs over 2 box sets at a time. And I think this would be the ideal way of releasing those, for me anyway. Like, can you imagine, take Doom Coalition, for example? Can you imagine if there had been a community? It's that community listening thing I really enjoy about it. Can you imagine if Doom Coalition had been an event release, like once a week over 16 weeks? You were getting a brand new episode, and we were all tuning in and listening like that.
I'd
So
have been
that's
all
why
over them.
I think the Eighth Doctor adventures would really suit this in
Yes,
particular.
much agreed. And they're kind of doing it with the two Eighth Doctor sets this year, aren't they, man? We're getting new companions, and it's basically a self-contained story, although this is going to be over 2-3 hour sets.
Yeah,
So the thinking's there, and I'm glad they're experimenting with how they are releasing things, and we are at a point now. I'm very sorry, CD people, but we are at a point now where downloads have massively taken over CDs in terms of how Big Finish is consumed, and I think that allows for a little bit more creativity in terms of the way things are released, and I'd encourage it. I want to see more of it.
agreed.
So one of the sort of monthly releases that we've been getting, as I said, is Dark Gallifrey. And well, I'm going to let you smugly tell us the prediction you made about the monks a couple of years ago.
I look back. This was 4 years ago that I first started putting it into our wee group chat. But yeah, I've been asking for a long time. Please, can we have a sitcom? Can we have a sitcom which is the two meddling monks, and it's Rufus Hint and Gemma Whelan, as the leads? And we finally got it, and it was really good. I had such a good time with this. I straight off the bat, best jokes by some considerable distance was just how self-aware they were about themselves and those Big Finish for the love of stories. What does that even mean?
Was it
And
was it the second set where
it
it actually
starts there.
opened with Big Finish and Stories getting married?
That's the last one. That's the last one of those
Oh, is
jokes
it?
they do. It's like
Yeah.
Big Finish getting married to Stories in general. But the first one, I think, the first time that gag appears, it's coming soon. Songs for the love of stories, featuring all your classic favorites, including Shooty Dalek Finale and Oh my God, what's that? Get out of my head. So yeah, I loved all those wee self-aware jokes about themselves. I think that was my favorite part.
Yes, I'd agree. They were a lot of fun, but that's not to take away from just how good Rufus Hound and Gemma Whelan were in these. Like they fully embraced the whole, okay, we're doing a monks sitcom. And they actually found a pretty good in-universe reason to have us doing a sitcom and everything. It panned out so well, and I think it was just a case of you have to have these characters written by this writer in this context. It all just fell into place perfectly, and it's been such a fantastic use of the Dark Gallifrey format. That being said, I'd like to know where Dark Gallifrey is going now, because there's been hints that it's all interconnected, that Dark Gallifrey is actually a thing, and all of this, and just none of it seems to be linking up quite in the way that maybe the first two sets hinted it was going to. So, like, I'm fairly sure we are due another Fourth Doctor adventure that he kind of gets picked out of to go and do the Morbius bit. So I kind of want to know where this is happening, but when you've got something like the Meddling Monks, I'm quite happy for it to just, yeah, whatever. I'm along for the ride. It's a lot of fun. It's really, really good. And hopefully there will be the same level of quality across the next few releases. We've had a Decade Master release. I enjoyed it. I think there's somewhere for the story to go. I know you're saving it for all three being released, but ultimately we're not too far off. And when they are all out, it'll be good to talk about them with you, because I think you'll enjoy them.
Yes, I'm glad. I'm very glad that Jeffrey Beavers is finally getting the chance to headline his own series as the Master, because I think every other incarnation aside from him has now had that opportunity at Big Finish, and it's truthfully a little bit scandalous that it's taken that long for this version of the Master to get his own series. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm predisposed to like that sort of gothic horror ghost story theme that they seem to be going for with them. But yes, I haven't heard it. I haven't heard the first one yet. I'm saving them, but I can listen to the full series in one fell swoop in a couple of months.
I suspect, judging by the first episode, I suspect that's going to be the best way to enjoy this one. We do still need a McQueen Master series of his own, which
That's true.
hopefully,
Forgot about him, actually.
hopefully that will
We
come
don't get
about in
enough.
Dark
We
Belfry.
don't get enough of his master generally.
No, and he's so good.
He is. He is. I did Dark Eyes towards the start of this year, and I'd forgotten just how good he was. He's a joy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the last thing on our agenda was it's a bit of a random release to pick out, really, but it's one we've obviously both enjoyed because we both said we want to talk about it, which is The War Doctor, Fear of the Light, which gave us the Rani after we've not seen the Rani at Big Finish for probably a decade, isn't it?
It was. I checked. It was. I think if not a full 10 years, very very close to it. The last time the Rani was in Big Finish was Planet of the Rani,
Yes.
and that was released in October 2015.
There you go then.
So it's 11
Um,
years nearly.
But we've got a really good Rani at Big Finish. Like I really like Siobhan Redmond, and obviously the rights to the Rani were sorted out by Telly Doctor Who, and I guess Big Finish is just able to piggyback off that. But hopefully we'll hear more of her because she was particularly effective in this. Like she's a good villain when done right, and I think that Big Finish have always done her right. Really, she's not appeared a lot every single time. She's had something to offer. Like Planet of the Rani's not my favourite story ever or anything, but I still like what it is fundamentally doing with the Rani. So yeah, I just thought this was really good, and we got to see, a bit of Time Lord Academy based bitchiness from her, and she was naming Daleks after characters that you'd be familiar with if you've read certain novels or listened to certain early Big Finishes. It was just a lot of fun and did culminate in what was actually quite an interesting story with Daleks in it. And it's very easy for Daleks in the Time War to not be interesting. So fair play to them for this one. As a whole, I'm really enjoying War Doctor Rises. I think we've had some really, really good stuff out of it. And I think maybe it's taken a while, but Big Finish finally have found their feet with the War Doctor and what they want to do with him.
Yeah, and Jonathan Carley deserves all the praise because if his performance was not as good as it is, the series wouldn't be half as good, and he has done so well carrying it. I just to come back to Fear of the Light, I really like how they handled the Rani because it feels like it's informed by the Rani on TV. Because there's certain elements there, like the TV series last year hinted that the Doctor and the Rani might have had a more romantic relationship than had previously been discussed. And that's referred to in this set. And I have to put my hand on my heart. I don't buy that for the Doctor and the Rani. I don't think that's at all present in their, the Kate O'Mara version. But it's obviously part of the Rani's character now, and I like how Big Finish handled that, and it felt cool that they were able to call forward to the RTD2 Rani in that way, while still having the more calculating clinical scientist version from the classic series here. I think this was Siobhan Redmond's best performance as the Rani. I think she felt I think there was more energy to it than her original appearances, and I'm really glad she came back after the 11 years, and it's still her version of the Rani that we got, because she was a real joy to listen to in this, and not every actor would have come back after a 10-year gap to something like this. So I'm delighted that it was Siobhan Redmond and we got her back again. I really hope it's not the last we've heard either from the Rani or from Siobhan Redmond's version of the Rani. I would love to hear her turning up again.
I think I mean, we've mentioned how good Jonathan Carley and Siobhan Redmond are. I think it helps that big, big, big chunks of this set are just basically a two-hander between them. It's a very slow-paced set. It's very much about just exploring the two characters and their relationship and how they see the universe and the Time War and all this kind of thing. And it really, really takes its time to just explore what's going on with them both. Now, obviously, there's a bit of manipulation going on and that kind of thing, and there's sort of a darker edge to it. And it's there, it's noticeable, it's pick upable. But I think the fact that it's essentially two regulars carrying 2/3 of the set is just, it's wonderful. And the fact that they do it so well, yeah, it really is a credit to those performances.
For sure.
Yeah. And what a strong note to end on. Indeed.
Absolutely.
So yes, well, I think we've exhausted coffee bar chat for now. No doubt we'll find our way in here, and you'll install some kind of other coffee bar feature to keep us entertained. But I'm a fan of the book corner. We should keep it. Still haven't got rid of that absolutely terrible chair that's in the TARDIS on Vengeance on Varos, though. So maybe that needs to go still. I thought we were skipping it. But yes, otherwise,
we'll get that weird sofa that Eccleston Tennant had in their TARDIS.
yes. Oh God, that was weird.
It's a weird space sofa.
Yes. Too many weird space sofas. I think we need the sofa from behind the sofa from the Blu-rays. That looks like a comfy sofa. Spacious.
No, I know exactly what we need. We need the sofa of a reasonable comfort.
Oh, yes. The sofa of reasonable comfort, which is interesting because I've got the Curse of Fatal Death lined up to rewatch because we're doing it in season by season relatively soon. So we've recorded up to 26 now.
Well,
and
when you do watch
Wilderness
it,
Years.
bring back the sofa of reasonable comfort and put it in the coffee bar.
Yes. And then we can open the next coffee bar episode with "Say hello to the sofa of reasonable comfort."
Yes, we've got it.
We've got a plan. We just need to get the sofa. But we shall leave it there for now. So thank you very, very much for joining me for these two coffee bar episodes. This is our first coffee bar two-parter.
Yes, we've been drinking coffee the whole time, and it's caffeine overload here. I'm going to have to go and run around the house 6,000 times.
Yes, we'll leave it there. So yeah, thanks very much, and we will be back for more Spodcasting very, very soon. Goodbye now.
Goodbye.